Hi, my name's David Brown. I'm with the HELIOPOLIS Expedition Team. This is presentation number 9. We're beginning now to transition to Palenque, a site that we believe correlates with the Book of Mormon's city of Bountiful. The reason being, there are multiple allusions to Christ. They actually have a temple dedicated to Christ that has a throne on it. And we believe that that particular building especially is indicative of an event that happened there that is the appearance of Christ in the Americas. So before we get into the other 3 presentations that have to do with Palenque, I want to spend one presentation, this is it, presentation number 9, on understanding the symbolism at Palenque. There are important concepts that just repeat over and over and over again, and the allusions are very important. The symbolisms that are there are very important to comprehending the message that is actually provided for us at Palenque. Before we begin deciphering the messages embedded in the carvings and structures at Palenque, there are 3 things we need to study in order to fully appreciate the complexity of the messages found here. First, there is the concept of the Egyptian BENNU bird. Herodotus was a Greek historian who traveled to Egypt at about 450 BC. to study with the Egyptian temple priests at Heliopolis. Heliopolis is the modern-day city of Cairo, which was also the capital city of the land of Goshen, the land of Egypt once inhabited by the Hebrew slaves. While in Heliopolis, Herodotus learned about the legend of the BENNU bird. This was a bird that returned to Heliopolis once every 500 years. When he returned, he would carry the bones of his parents encased in a ball of myrrh. And here you see, actually, this is the illustration below is taken from the pyramid texts. And it shows a BENNU bird on top of an Egyptian boat. And he has on his head a ball. That is a myrrh ball. He then selects a tree at the Temple of the Sun, where he makes a nest from fragrant twigs. The light of the sun then causes the nest to be engulfed in flames, and the bird, the tree, and the nest all burn to ash. Out of the ashes rises a new bird, who then flies back to his place of origin and prepares to return in another 500 years. Herodotus brought this legend back to Greece, where it was later westernized into what we today call the phoenix. So the origin of the phoenix comes actually out of Egypt, and it is founded on the concept of the BENNU bird. I believe that Herodotus told the story correctly, but that the legend we have today was changed through the years. I believe that Herodotus was taught a prophecy of the one who would come to the Temple of the Sun in Heliopolis in about 500 years. He would bring the teachings of his parent, or in other words, the bones. When a person dies and goes into the ground, shortly after, once the ground has done its work, all that's left are bones. And in the same, when our parents pass on, what they leave behind are their teachings. So bones are illustrative of the teachings that carry on. So he brings with him the teaching of his parent in its original form. That's why it's preserved in a ball of myrrh. And that while his spirit is yet in a bodily form, which is a bird nesting in a tree, we talk about that today. When we actually have a hymn, some glad morning, when this life is over, I'll fly away. My spirit will leave the body and I will fly away. So the bird nesting in a tree is his spirit coming in a bodily form. He will be put to death, which is the consumed by fire, but that his spirit will rise to new life in an immortal form, which is the new bird rising out of the ashes. This is clearly the story of the Christ prophecy, and the aspect of Christ, who is the BENNU bird, journeying to Heliopolis was fulfilled when Joseph, Mary, and Jesus fled to Egypt and resided there until Herod was dead. Legend places the Holy Family in Heliopolis. Understand that Lehi was from the tribe of Joseph. The wife of Joseph was Egyptian, and therefore the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh are half Egyptian and half Hebrew. Moses was raised in Pharaoh's court and received the education of a son of Pharaoh. He would have been instructed in the temples of Egypt. I believe that the Book of Mormon people were well versed in this prophecy and that they were aware of the Egyptian symbols for this bird. The pyramid text illustrates this bird with two very long crest feathers, and it is also associated with the color green because of new life. Okay, so in the upper left-hand corner here, we have a BENNU bird. This is on a pyramid text, by the way. And the BENNU bird, his beak is touching a water lily that is resting on top of a nest in a tree. It's indicative of the spirit in the body. But the water lily is beyond that. It's actually rooted in something beyond the spirit in the tree. In other words, in the afterlife. And so the afterlife comes up. It has a blossom, which actually is indicating life after death. And the beak of the BENNU bird is touching the water lily, the green aspect of it, as a matter of fact. So there is an implication here that this bird is the one who is involved with life after death. Notice that he has two crest feathers that are very long that come off the back. In the upper right-hand side, you have again the BENNU bird illustrated with the two crest feathers, but then he's carrying a crown of both the upper and lower Nile of Egypt. Down below, in the longer display of the pyramid text, you have Horus, who's sitting upon the throne in the afterlife with that same crown that the BENNU bird is wearing. It is the crown of the upper and lower Nile. And he, out of the foundation that he's setting on, is coming a water lily that's blossoming. Notice that Horus is green. All of this is alluding to the fact that the BENNU bird, the pharaohs of Egypt, and the story of Horus all kind of interweave together into a concept of life after death and how green represents eternal life, or life that's blossoming, that's flourishing. And so he is alive in the afterlife by virtue of the fact that he is green. He is still producing. He's not brown with his fruit falling to the ground, but he is alive. It makes sense that these Egyptian people, the people of Joseph, with Egyptian influence, would adapt their sacred concepts to icons that were part of their everyday world. So, we now have the phoenix concept established in the Americas through the image of the Quetzal bird. And my point being here is they're bringing with them this cultural baggage, this understanding of this bird who's representing the spirit in the body and who has influence of life after death and so on. So when they get here, they begin to see how the flora and the fauna interact with each other in the New World. And they begin to identify a particular bird with their concept of eternity and life after death. The quetzal bird is elusive and often difficult to find, like the BENNU bird. It builds its nest in remote places and usually 25 to 30 feet above the jungle floor, so it is highly elevated above the plain that we walk in. This aspect is a parallel to the rarity of the BENNU bird. The striking green color of the quetzal bird alludes to renewed life. The red breast to the heartfelt sacrifice, the white feathers to its purity, and the two long tail feathers allude to the two crest feathers of the BENNU bird. In other words, we believe that the quetzal bird is an Americanized version of the same concept as the BENNU bird. And the reason I bring this up is because we find the allusion to quetzal is always associated with priests or the sacred. And it is an allusion to this green avian, I guess I should say, a green bird. So it is a forever living spirit. And they incorporated that. In addition to that, I believe that this got solidified with Abinadi, especially with the red-breasted quetzal bird that we're looking at here, because Abinadi spoke of spiritual things, the bird. He talked about life after death, the green. He gave his life for what he believed and preaching what he believed. He died by fire, which is the red breast. That the fact that he died by fire. The white of the tail feathers is the purity of his intentions that led to his death. He did nothing but preach the gospel, and that was offensive to the powers that he was up against, and he died for it. So we believe that the concept of the quetzal bird and its allusion to the BENNU bird was lionized by Abinadi and his death. And that's why when Alma came into Zarahemla and Yaxchitlan, we start seeing suddenly this flourish of quetzal feathers and the illusion of the quetzal religion being that parallels the Christian religion. The second concept to review has to do with the scripture concerning the breech twins born to Judah. Here is the record from Genesis. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that, behold, his brother came out, and she said, How hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez, which, by the way, was the Christ lineage that we're given in Matthew. And afterward came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Zerah is the name of the child born to Judah who had a scarlet thread or red thread tied around his hand. The implication is that King Zedekiah, the father of Mulek, was a descendant of Zerah. Why do we say that? It is the reason that the Mulekite king line included King Zarahemla, which in Hebrew means seed of sadness. Zerah is the head of the scarlet thread seed or household. Therefore, the Mulekite claim to Jewish kingship is through the scarlet thread, or in Mayan terms, it comes through the red house. We find the red house alluded to over and over again in the Maya glyph writing. The third concept to introduce is the cube of space. The Hebrew ALEPH-BET, or alphabet, is comprised of the following. There are 3 mother letters. There are 7 letters with 2 sounds and 12 letters with 1 sound for a total of 22 letters. The 3 mother letters are the 3 axes of length, width, and height. They have assigned to them the letter Mem, which is east-west, and it alludes to water. Shin, which is south-north and alludes to fire. And Aleph, which is above and below. It's the axis of earth to heaven. And Aleph alludes to air, movement. The 7 letters with 2 sounds are the 7 points created by the endpoints of the axes and the point of their intersection. The point here being that we have the 3 that are the axes that create length, width, and height. And at the end of each of those line segments is a point. And where they all meet together is another point. So you have a total of 7 points. It is east, south, west, north, below, above, and then in the center of my breast where all of those axes meet. In other words, this is the universe that we walk through, each one of us individually. The 12 letters with 1 sound represent the 12 lines that form the cube. Therefore, the Hebrew ALEPH-BET, or the alphabet, provides the matrix for the cube of space. And thanks to Einstein, we can see that the cube of space is a representation of the time-space continuum. In Mayan sacred expressions, the QUINCUNX is found in many places, and it is represented as 5 dots placed with 4 corners and a center, or at other times in the form of a cross. The 5 points of the QUINCUNX are actually an expression of the intersection of 2 axes, which is length and width. It is the expression of the 4 directions and their intersection. This is the world that God created for the perfection of man. We are born into this world, and we will eternally remain in this 2-dimensional world unless we choose to be raised from it by means of the 3rd axis. We are destined to remain forever in this physical realm until we establish the axis that runs from earth to heaven. We must expand from the realm of 5 points to one that contains 7 points. Man is only truly complete when he has established the axis of earth to heaven. And this is the gospel. We are born into this plane of 5 points, our physical existence plane that we walk on of the 4 directions every day. This is where we exist. And we will remain here until we make the choice to call upon our God and to request him to come into our world and personal world and establish that axis of earth to heaven. And then when that happens, we become a 5-point plane individual. We become fulfilled as a 7-point cube individual. The allusion to the Einstein aspect is the world that we walk through is a three-dimensional world. Actually, it has a fourth dimension, which is time. And we are encapsulated in time. If we go outside of time, then we are eternal. But the existence that we're in right now it is a cube. It has boundaries. And we cannot go past those boundaries. When we die, our spirit is released from that cube, and it is in the boundless realms of eternity. All of these concepts will be seen multiple times throughout the carvings, glyphs, and burials at Palenque. The image of the celestial bird is the theme of several major temples, and the celestial bird is a reference to the Quetzal bird, and it is representative of Christ and things that are in the heavens. The burials found here are covered in red ochre as a testimony of their Hebrew royal connection. This on the left is the burial of the Red Queen, and on the right is a recreation of the burial of Pakal. They are covered in red ochre, and all the way throughout multiple places in the Yucatan, and actually throughout, mostly in the Yucatan, we find a red hand all over placed on walls, and it's an allusion, we believe, to the Zerah heritage that they have. And the earth to heaven axis, along with the use of the numbers 5 and 7, are strategically placed here. All of these elements are foundational to fully comprehending the message written in stone at this site. And here on the right, you see the iconic Temple of the Cross tablet illustration that demonstrates the earth monster at the bottom. That's what the epigraphers call that. That's the earth monster. Upon him is the world tree, or the axis of earth to heaven. We would call it the tree of life. And at the very top is the celestial bird. So, celestial or heaven above, earth beneath. It is the earth to heaven axis that's represented by this cross, this world tree. Again, these are going to be seen over and over and over again here at Palenque as we go through these next 3 slideshows. And it is critical to understanding the nuances and the deeper understanding of how this is testifying to Jesus Christ. So we hope to see you in presentation number 10, which is going to be taking a look at the expressions of their heritage and the design of Palenque. Thank you.